Companies love to talk about their values, but all too often it's a poster on the fridge near the coffee machine. They're poorly worded, they're thin and meaningless, and they're hard to remember, which means they are impossible to apply. But when you do it right, it reflects who the company is. They're easy to remember, and most importantly, they're easy for people to live by. My guest today is Alia Lalani. She is a culture coach. She spends her time working with organizations of all sorts of shapes and sizes to understand who they are, who they want to be, and how they want their people to behave. Today, she's going to walk through her values starter kit, which she's left behind for you to download from the Build Your Edge website. So if you are in a company that would like to understand its values more, who would like to do more than just paying lip service to values, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. Alia, thank you for joining us today. So you have a long career in different companies of different sizes, but now you spend your time helping companies understand what their values should be, but more importantly, how to embed them so that they're part of the fabric of the company and they actually have some value. Let's start at the beginning. Why do values even matter? Why should we bother going through this exercise?
I'm going to start with a stat, and I think this really helps define why values are important. But 71% of employees consider their organizational values as a key factor in their job satisfaction. That's taken from Infuse Solutions just last year. Now, that's a huge number of people who think that values are important. And the best way that I like to explain it is that values are a compass, or they're your team's compass. And without them, you don't really have a culture. You probably have a bit more of chaos. So this means that you don't define what matters, but your culture will still form. It will probably be by default, but it won't be by design. So everybody will do things based on their own beliefs and their own assumptions, which then leads to a lack of predictability and consistency. So ultimately, our values become a filter for all of our choices, and they guide us in how we do things, particularly when nobody's looking.
Got it. So on the one hand, having them in place is a powerful thing because people, I guess, believe them and live them, and therefore they enjoy it, and therefore they stay. But equally, if the values are not very strong or not very good or just absent, presumably people would leave as well. Is that fair?
Absolutely. I mean, how many times have we seen values up on a wall as one word, and we have no idea really what they mean? We know that more and more people want to stay in jobs because they feel much more satisfied. They feel like they're in a culture that thrives, that allows them to be their best selves. And values are such an intrinsical part of that. If we don't have good values in place and not just up on our walls to tell us how to do our everyday behaviors, then we don't really know how we're going to get there. And what I mean by there is every company has a purpose, right? Every organization, or hopefully individual, has a mission or a purpose. We all hopefully have a vision, which is where we want to get to, and our North Star in, let's say, 5 years. But the values are how we're going to get there. And without them, we don't know how we're going to get to our North Star.
Understood. And I was going to say much the same thing. I've worked in companies where values have been very clear, very easy to understand, make complete sense, and you can see them in action. But a lot of places, you go to the kitchen to make a cup of coffee, you walk past the fridge, and there's a poster on the fridge with some values and long descriptions that no one ever reads, and they don't remember them, and therefore they're pointless.
I've even seen them in the bathrooms. I've seen those posters of the toilet doors. So Some companies are really, I would say committed to making sure that you see them everywhere. But what does that mean? I mean, I can definitely think of a time in a company where one of the values was optimistic. Great.
Mm,
You want me to be more optimistic? How am I going to be more optimistic? We tend to start or have these one word nouns that we can probably, as you say, it sticks in our head, but we don't know what to do with that. And without the action piece of the value, we don't know how we're meant to do things differently. And it becomes a statement, not really an action plan.
yeah,
Or there's no accountability that comes with that one word, right? So
yeah,
they'll get introduced as these 4 or 5 amazing words, and then they get forgotten and there's no follow up.
yeah. And what's the opposite of that? So, um, if we spend some time and we get our values right and we think they're good and we put them in place, how will I know how, as a leader in a company or even as a frontline employee, how will I know if those values are true and good, but also being acted on and properly part of the fabric rather than just an exercise that we went through and we've done that, tick the box. So how will I know if they're working?
You'll see it. You'll see it, you'll hear it, you'll feel it, you'll be able to measure it. Let's say one of our values is curiosity, or we define it as ask question or something around asking questions, or ask questions with the intention to learn, however we want to define that is a bit long, let's maybe not use that. But um
Yeah.
we will see it in action, so we will see our employees take a moment, probably pause and start to be more curious. They might use it in their language directly and say, are we being more curious? Or they might say, shall we ask another question or get to the why before we conclude this? Maybe not in those perfect words that I've just articulated, but we'll start to feel it all around us.
And who are the values for? Because naturally, you're going to have a team of people, maybe the leaders of a company, who will define what the values are. And then you want to embed them into the fabric of the company so that the employees live them. But to a degree, they also go outside the company so that customers and investors and just people who are looking at your company can see what they are. So should you put them on your website and say, these are our values? Or is it enough that they're embedded and the company reflects them and people understand what they are?
We should definitely put them on our website. They should be externally facing as much as they are internally facing. In fact, one of the exercises I like to do with people is, what does this mean for us internally and what does it mean for us externally? So it's really important that we live our values and we genuinely live our values internally, but also externally, because the more that we externally show our values or we live them, they act as a magnet. And this is what adds to our employer value proposition, or our EVP, which is what makes us unique and different as an employer. And there's actually an amazing stat that says that 61% of employees would leave their current job for a company with a better culture, a number that's higher than those who would leave for a 10% salary bump.
Oh, wow. So it's
Yeah.
very impactful. Okay.
Yeah.
And I know that when I've been talking to companies about a job, for example, I'm aware that I am being interviewed on the company values. And also when I've done a lot of interviewing, a lot of our interviewing is around the values. Does this person reflect the values of our company?
Absolutely. Because, and as I said earlier, values help us make decisions. And one of those decisions is hiring people. So actually, we can ask questions in that interview process once we know what our company values are, to show, does this person demonstrate one of our core values? And that might really help us determine whether that person is going to fit into our culture.
Yeah. Yeah. I talk a lot about knowledge and skill and behavior. Knowledge and skill I can grow, but your behavior you sort of bring and it's got to match. And if it doesn't match, you're probably not going to succeed. Let's get into the practicalities now. Let's actually walk through your process. And what we're going to do today is we're going to pretend that this podcast has grown to the point where I need a team of 20 people running around and doing everything for me. and that it's the time when I need to sit down and say, right, what are our values as an organization? So you're going to approach me like a potential client, and we're going to step through your process so that anybody who is listening or watching understands what you do and maybe can do it themselves. And of course, you've left behind a digital asset for us, which is the framework that you would run through. So it's an amazing asset that you've left behind. Thank you for that. So what's the first thing I'd like to understand is, you're going to come into my organization. Who should be there in the room with you when we do this? Is this a small set of people, sort of the CEO and maybe the head of people? Is it a bigger team? Is it a bigger team from HR? Is it a bunch of people from the company? Who should be in the room to define what these values are for me and my organization?
So we're manifesting the future of Build Your Edge, where we're 20 people. Um, as long as you are in that room, that is the most important, because you, as the CEO, the managing director, however you position yourself, you're going to be the person that is accountable for the culture. I'm going to come in and help you, but I'm going to leave. So you're going to be the person that makes sure that this process goes ahead, that you execute it, the behaviors are in place. So as long as you are in the room, that is the most important, because you will then guide it. From there, if you're 20 people, I would actually encourage either we do it with all 21 of you, or we do it with you and your SLT as a starting point. But because there's 21 people, actually, this is an amazing opportunity to bring people on board and build their accountability and help them feel that they are building a company and the values that they really want to be a part of. And then they'll stay longer.
Got it. But I think what I'm picking up there is that if I am not in the room, if me as the figurehead or whatever you want to call me, if me as the person that's got the vision for the company, if I'm not in the room, I'm not bought in, I don't know what the values are, and they're not really going to land. Is that fair?
Exactly. You own the vision. You're accountable for the culture. And I, as the facilitator, am here to manage the conversation and the process. I can help push you, but eventually you're going to be the one who's linking up the vision with the values.
Yeah. And I can't just hand it off to a bunch of people and say, hey, sort the values out for me.
No, because that's one of the biggest blockers, right? We don't see our senior leadership team or our execs demonstrating these behaviors. Well, why should the rest of the company be doing it? Actually, if you're not going to do it, then we're not going to follow suit. And the values, again, go back to meaning nothing. So
Right.
you need to be in
Okay.
there.
Great. So I've collected, um, let's just say that all of us are in the company. We're small enough that we can all get into a room and we can all sit down and do this as an exercise. So you're here. We don't know what we're doing. What's the very first thing that we should do?
Okay, so I'm in the room. The first thing that I would do, and we'll see this on the first page of the values handout or the values starter kit, is to ask you a few questions to understand who you are as a current organization. And actually, the first question I always ask is, what makes you proud? And it is open ended, and it is, specifically not specific, so that you as a team can come up with your own answers. And actually, either we can do that in the group setting, but sometimes I like to do it that we do it individually first and then share the stories after. That way people think a little bit more and then you can pull everything together. But the purpose of asking these open-ended questions to understand who you are as an organization is to naturally identify what words come out amongst the 21 of you.
Right. And if I'm a super dominant CEO, you don't want me just saying, stop, you lot be quiet. The values or the things that I'm proud of are this. And then everyone has to follow suit. You want it to be a collaborative effort that everyone buys into the not just the process, but also the outcome.
Absolutely. Because even though you as a CEO would be leading the work, actually in the workshop and in the room, your input is as equal as everybody else's. And I think that
Yeah.
is really important,
Yeah. But not more equal.
not more equal. And
Got
that's
it.
why sometimes having an external person can help push that a little bit, but we'll make sure that everybody has a voice in that.
So we're in a room together and you're asking these insightful questions, and we're beginning to think to ourselves and answer the questions about what makes us proud and what identifies us. There is a danger, isn't there, that we could end up with either we work really hard to try and come up with a set of unique and specific values, which are just so us, they're so different from everybody else's, or you sort of almost pull out the thesaurus and pick a bunch of words and you sound very much the same as a lot of other companies. What should I be striving for? The ease of being a bit blending, a bit blur, and a bit ordinary, or really putting in the work to come up with something which is uniquely build your edge?
Absolutely the latter. You want people to come and choose to work at Build Your Edge because you are not like any other company. It goes back to the employer value proposition piece and what makes you unique. I've worked with clients where they have created values that reflect the industry that they are in. So there are a few plays on the word, so you know who they are. I worked with values where they want to make it much more fun rather than being serious, and clients who want to be more serious. But it's because the values are a reflection of your culture. So you want it to be unique to you. So absolutely put the time in. We'll do it over 3 workshops rather than one, because you want your people to be bought into it and really reflect the organization that you want to become.
Right. And this still sounds quite aspirational is maybe the wrong word, but you're defining this picture. But there's also a second part, isn't there, which is how we actually act, how we actually behave, how we actually operate. And I know that one of the questions you ask is very much around, at your best, how do you act? Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yes, of course. So, one of the questions, so say we've gone through the first set of questions, which are understanding who we currently are and trying to identify the words. On the second page of the handout, we now have a values bank. And in that values bank, it literally says choose the top 3 to 5 for when you're delivering your best work. Um, so it's like thinking about, say, we have that really negative team that we were talking about earlier who could not come up with a single reason or a positive attribute. But there probably is a time when they've worked to execute to get to a goal. So when you ask the team, when you're delivering your best work, what value has come up for you, you know that that's what the team needs to get to the best place that they need to be.
Okay. And you also talk about understanding what you won't compromise on, which is, I think, a bit different to we want to act with integrity, for example. There will be some things that we just say, we're never, ever going to give up on that one thing.
Well, if we think about one thing that we're never going to give up on, why are we not going to give up on it? If we ask that question and then have the team in the room and start to dissect the reason behind why they're not going to give up on something specific, and let's say, even if it's an arguing team, but they need to get something out for the client, well, they're never going to compromise on the client's outcome. So, actually, does that then tell us that client first becomes one of their core values because that is their driver?
Understand that. That's really good. And that then either becomes a value in and of itself, or it feeds into all of the other values so that they end up with that result.
Absolutely. I actually um, always think that a valuable question to ask around values is, what's the thing that pissed you off the most? Because if you find out what's pissed you off the most and you identify what in that situation has pissed you off, you can
Hmm.
work backwards to then identify what the value is. Because let's say it's the meeting was unorganized and there was no agenda. Well, why is that annoying you? Well, because there is no intentionality, there is no agenda, like, not agenda, but there's no intentionality. And all of a sudden, you've now identified that actually intentionality is really important to you and therefore must be a value.
So your values starter kit that you're leaving for the audience today has these questions, and people can actually start this exercise on their own. When you walk in and we're answering these questions, are we thinking about who we are, or who we should be, or who we would like to be? Because I think there's a very subtle difference.
There are absolutely subtle differences. And I would say one of the biggest mistakes that companies make is starting with looking at 20,000 words or 50 words or whatever, and seeing a word and thinking, oh, I would love it if we were that. Well, and let's say that is authentic for just for the sake of me pulling a word out. But the whole purpose of asking you questions about who you currently are and what makes you proud and where you currently stand is to find out who you are today, because that's really where the heart of value starts. You have to start with who you already are. If you skip that step and jump straight to who you want to be, you're not defining your culture. You're creating this wish list, right? So you are defining an ideal state that doesn't really match the reality of your current day to day culture. And the team that's there will see right through it. And already we have lost people. So the most powerful values are already living inside of the company. And our job or my job in that room is to help you uncover them first before we start to identify particular words.
Right. What if I have never got my values sorted out? And to be honest, the culture in the company is not great. Okay. And the people in the room are sat there, with their arms folded. They don't really want to be there because they don't believe in the culture of the company. And in their head, they're thinking, this company is dishonest. It's unreliable. It's, and a set of values that are pretty negative and you don't want to be. And naturally, you want to be. If I pick, I think honesty is a terrible example, but we'll work with it for now. If all of my team is sitting there thinking this is a dishonest company, but we put honesty up as a value, there's clearly a mismatch. How do you get around that?
Yes. So I think, well, first of all, one of the questions that I would want to ask is, when is the time that you have been your best? And at the time that you've been your best, what was happening? So we'd want the team to imagine a situation when hopefully all of you worked really, really well together and there was a good situation. Because even in a shit culture, hopefully there was one project that everybody worked well or something to that effect. That's probably where I would start and try to tease out maybe one or two situations where there were positive parts. Um, and if we were to, I mean, if we look at the word honesty, there's a brilliant video by Simon Sinek where he says if you have to put honesty on the wall, you've probably got a bigger problem.
I knew honesty was a really bad example. Yeah.
No, but it is a good example because some people will use the word honesty, but actually the purpose of values is about instilling behaviors that we want to make our company in the best place possible, not basic expectations. But also, how can you live honesty? What does that, it
Mm,
goes back to the purpose of what does that mean? So it's really about articulating what that means to you. Is it always tell the truth, which is the example that he gives in the video? Um, and again, maybe that's something that needs to be thought in that particular company. But let's say it's integrity. I have a particular client that I worked with who integrity, we did the set of questions, what made them proud, what came up when they're at their best. And integrity, doing the right thing, came up for every single person. And it seemed like it was really prevalent. And it turned out that always act with integrity became one of their core values. But actually, it was the way that we ended up defining it, because in relation to their clients, they are never going to do something in the bad interest of one of their clients. They're always going to be honest with each other, even if they make mistakes. So it was
right.
taking it from that next level.
So that's the first part. It's a deep, inward-looking question and answer session led by you, and we will begin to understand who we are and who we want to be. What's the outcome of that, and what do we do with that next?
Yeah. So for me, that is session one. It's really understanding where we are. After that, I would take away what my insights are and what I've seen and heard that probably people in the room haven't noticed, and start to pick out some words. If you're using this through the values starter kit and you're doing this yourself, you will probably start to identify words that have come up for you. So maybe respect, empathy, proactivity, and start to probably circle them or look at what those words are. And feel, do they resonate? Do they not resonate? But, and as great as that is, if we talked about this at the beginning, if we have just the one word empathy, what does that mean?
Mm.
So actually, yes, we can go to the next part, which is choosing a word, but that's just a small stepping stone to the third part, because this is the most important part for me. Now, let me ask you, Jeremy, what does respect mean to you?
Wow. I think respect means thinking of other people and I'm trying to describe it without actually saying the word respect, but thinking of other people and really understanding what it is they're trying to achieve, how they operate, and try and behave in a way that brings out the best in the other person. I think for me, that's respect.
Thank you. Um, for me, I would define respect as listening to someone's viewpoint.
I like your answer a lot better than mine. Yeah, but
No,
but I think we're saying more or less the same thing. Interestingly, aren't we? It's about respect. It's about the other person.
exactly. But we're saying it in our own way, right? So my point is that we might have say we're 21 of us in the room and every single person has a different answer. Just because we've come to the conclusion that respect is really important for all of us, what does that mean? And I've said this
Yeah,
probably a few times today, but the next step is really identifying for each of these values what that means to you as a team, because respect could mean something completely different. And we want everybody to be on the same page as to what respect means for Build Your Edge. So
yeah,
the third part of this is really moving through the words that you've chosen to think about what they are, what do they mean, how do they show up in your day to day, are we living them, but also then identifying why they're important, because then we start to get a bit more of a holistic picture of what this value is and how we see it and what maybe are the behaviors that are starting to show up.
yeah.
Now, one of
And
sorry, go on.
but if I can just go back a stage, if respect for some people might actually be, I want people to respect me. But and that they may think, well, that's one of the values I want. I want you, the company, to respect me and my time and my effort and everything else. Whereas everybody else in the room is thinking, no, we should be respecting other people. How do you uncover that mismatch?
Well, couldn't we have somewhere that's, it's eventually we get to, we respect each other. So we encompass both of them. With the individual, where that first person is talking about, well, I need the company to respect me, they're actually talking about their personal values rather than the organizational values. And when we're creating team values, we're creating values that will help us get to our mission and our vision, because it's how we're going to get there. So really, we probably want to think of it in the space of, we respect each other, whether it's in the workplace, but we listen to each other in meetings so that we can X, Y, and Z.
So we're now in the stage where we're narrowing it down to some words which really resonate with the values that we have started to describe for ourselves. So you're going to help us now narrow down onto some words. So first of all, how many words should that be? How broad and generic should we be, and how closed and tight and specific? Is it 3 values, 4 values? Is it a word? Is it a list of 10 that will eventually narrow down? What's the next piece?
So every company is unique and will do things in different ways. My honest opinion is that we should have 4 to 5 values, because otherwise we forget them. You want to be able to remember your values and talk to people quite openly and honestly about them, and not have to think about the seventh or eighth or ninth value. And 4 to 5 seems like a very good way of distilling the things that are really important, but also, having them everywhere, being able to demonstrate your behaviors, being able to talk to people about them. And that way they don't get lost in the sea of jargon.
Super. So you've now helped us examine us here at Build Your Edge, and we now understand what our values are, who we are, and to a degree, some aspiration. We understand now what our values should be, and you've helped us get it down to a list of, let's just say, 4 words, which now represent our values. But those words on their own are pretty useless because they're open to interpretation. And as you said earlier on, I think was integrity. What does that mean? So now how do you help us go to the point where those words are values that we can actually remember? And I guess a single word is useless, but equally a paragraph is equally useless. How do you help us get it down to a value that can appear somewhere and I can remember and I can begin to enact?
Yeah. Um, so let's say we work through this. We've come to the idea that curiosity is really important for Build Your Edge, for getting podcasts and speakers together. And we've decided that to us at Build Your Edge, curiosity is the desire to understand why. The first
I
thing I
like
always
that. That resonates as a really good value. We'll go with
okay,
that.
well
Yeah.
maybe you can
Yeah.
use it in the future. So
Yeah.
the desire,
Coming to a website near you soon. Yeah.
I love it. Let's do it. See, and let me ask you, let me turn it back. What makes the desire to understand why resonate more than curiosity?
Mm. So if I think of Build Your Edge, we are really trying to help other people, right? And I spend a long time talking to guests saying, with all due respect, it's not about you, it's about the audience. So having that conversation with someone like you earlier, me being curious and asking the dumb, stupid shit questions to help me and everyone listening understand what it is that you're doing so they can take it away and use it themselves. For me, I need curiosity.
Absolutely. So you need curiosity, you know it's one of your values, but understanding the why, what's the difference between curiosity and understand the why?
Mm. I'm going to think about this one live. Um, that's a tough question, actually. I don't know the answer to that. I think I need to be curious so that other people can understand the why. In my mind, they're sort of connected but different. I don't know if I'm answering that question very well. Help me out here, Alia.
It's like, that's what I'm here to do. No, do
Yeah.
you know what? You're right. They are connected, but they're different. So curiosity is the noun. Understand the
Ah,
why makes it actionable. It's
got it. I
something that
understand.
you can do, right? And so that's what makes the biggest difference from going above and beyond doing your initial Google search or your to dig a little deeper to get to an answer, whatever it might be. In the context of Build Your Edge, it might mean dedicating more time to exploration or proactively looking for new show formats or reaching out to experts in the industry. It will be however you define it, but being able to understand the why takes us a little bit further from the noun of curiosity. And that's what I would do is I would want to make it actionable. So
Got
the
it.
first thing I like to ask is there a verb attached to it? If you have a verb attached to it, you can start to do it, right? And so making all of these values actionable is turning it into that verb, whether it's to ask, to explore, to learn, whichever. And when you define your values, you create a playbook of behaviors that then become observable and repeatable. So this really takes us from the next step of it being a word on the wall to something that we can actually do.
I understand. So curious is something I can be, but ask better questions is something I can do.
Exactly.
I
And when we
understand.
do it, it becomes much more relatable as a behavior.
Yeah. And if everybody here at Build Your Edge asked more questions, then overall the organization is going to grow in the way that we want it to grow.
Exactly in the way that you express the value. And you'll know that you've succeeded because the Build Your Edge team won't be just talking about curiosity, but they're going to be using its behaviors as a verb. And they'll say, I'm going to dig a little deeper on this speaker before we write the script, or let's ask a few more questions to understand why. And you start to see your values being lived in daily conversations as an action. And then, they become a part of your actual culture.
Love it. Love it. And it happens without, I mean, we started at the top by saying, imagine I'm this person that's built this organization. It happens in rooms that I'm not in. It's
Exactly.
not dependent on me. I naturally need to reflect it and do it myself. But when the values are constructed correctly with as you say, something we can be and then something that we can do. When the do is happening, then all around me, the organization is growing without me having to be there.
Exactly. It's how you get things done.
We've now arrived at the point where you've asked all of these questions and we've done lots of navel gazing. We've understood ourselves. We've narrowed it down into some words which now start to represent our values. And we've also asked questions about, well, what do they really mean and how would we act them out? I get that completely now. And at the beginning, I mocked the poster on the fridge that said, should we just walk past this poster and ignore it? But somehow you almost need that, don't you? You need to have gone through the process to work out what your values are, and you need to work them out really well so they're easy to understand and enact. But then you need some output. You need to be able to demonstrate them somewhere. You probably do need a poster on the fridge, right? Or something. How do you take us now from this world of ideas and words into something that we can actually put out into our organization?
So the next part is defining our behaviors in relation to the values. So we have our value. Let's say we're carrying down the thread of curiosity, or we're using dig a little deeper for curiosity. And then we have, but what does that mean? As we've said, what does dig a little deeper look like in reality? Well, we need to be able to hear it, we need to be able to see it, and we need to be able to measure it. And in order to do that, we need specific behaviors that tell us that we are living our value. So in that room, I would get you and your colleagues to write down behaviors that actually demonstrate that we can see curiosity, we can hear curiosity, we can measure curiosity. So whether that is through asking curious questions, and maybe we have a particular bank of questions that we listen to in a team meeting, or create that space that allows for a bit more curiosity. It's about being specific about the actions and behaviors that sit underneath each particular value. And once we build that all together, that becomes your behavioral playbook to live by. So you can then measure whether people are actually living these values or not.
And more than that, more than just seeing the behaviors taking place. As I say, if I reflect on a company that I worked at, I won't mention it, but the values were so embedded in everything, even the company town halls, the content would be, and now we're going to have not quite these words, but now we're going to have a section which talks about this value. And so they'd maybe have a guest on, or maybe they would have somebody from the company who had reflected it. And so it was everywhere. It was, these are our values. It's not just what you do in your day-to-day work, but as a company, we're going to reflect them and we're going to structure everything around the values. How do I get to that point?
Time, making sure that people are bought in, but embedding values is so important. So it needs to be done in the right way. And I think this comes into three different elements. So you have the immediate. So you have to launch your values, don't just send an email to everybody, but hold a
These are your
kickoff.
values. Yeah.
Yeah, here are your values. You're now going to live
Yeah.
them. You'll
Yeah.
see them on the wall. But
Yes.
you want people to know that as an organization, you are invested in how you are going to do this, and these are the values that your organization is going to live by. So you want something like a launch event or a kickoff session to explain what each of these values mean and how it applies to everybody. So again, telling them that our value is dig a little deeper. Well, we've got to this because you all said curiosity. What does this mean in practice? It means X, Y, and Z. What are the behaviors behind it? Well, we will know that you are digging a little deeper when you do this, when you do that. And so that first immediate launch is extremely important. The next part is the medium term, but it's more about the reinforcing. We see so many values that do point number one. They launch, they're there, people know, and then they die a sudden death.
Hmm.
Um, and actually, this is the part where we need to weave them into our daily life. We need to make them a regular part of conversations or meetings. Or are we having a difficult decision or a difficult conversation? Can we use those values as a compass to help guide that? are we giving feedback? And instead of giving feedback in a generic or vague term, can we use it in relation to one of the values? I noticed X. Could we perhaps do something that's more in line with Y? So coaching maybe your employee to help get to that value. Um, and then, of course, recognition and praise becomes a really big part of that. So when we see people behaving in the way that's in line with our values, we want to recognize them and we want to praise them so that people start to see that and it becomes more and more something that gets talked about. And maybe we have, values champions that then that we can highlight and showcase who are doing great work. I also think we need to include culture champions in that, where we assign people amongst the organization to help us embed this new culture because, you know, it's all about making sure that everybody's bought into it and it's not just top down or whatever side it's coming in from, but then everybody feels like they're a part of that. And then, of course, we have the long term. So in the long term, where the company that you were talking about probably got to is it's so integrated in all the processes. They are part of the core operations. And that means we are, as we've talked about, hiring for our values by asking relevant questions in interviews. When we onboard our new employees, we're teaching them about our values from day one. We're actually using our PDRs or our personal development reviews to evaluate performance based on how people live the values and not just what they do. And in the long term, that becomes a part of our DNA rather than something that we have to consistently remind people of.
So we've come full circle now. We've done the whole process, and we've launched, and we can begin to see it being part of our daily life inside the company. So it's working. Is that it? Are we done?
This has to become regular practice. It can't just be done, right? We've looked at a immediate, a midterm, and a long term. It's going to take a long time for this to be fully embedded and for culture change to happen if you are, for example, an organization of 1,000 people. But this is going to be our DNA. We don't want to stop it. We want to continuously review our practices, making sure we're living up against our values. And at one point in our journey, when we talked about this earlier, when you're a company of 500, you're very different to a company of 1,000. We might need specific values when we are a startup because we need to get shit done and we
Uh-huh.
need to do it in a particular way. And maybe we're looking at investment and whatever it might be. But in 3 to 5 years, our strategic priorities probably change. So it might be that we need to reassess our values and we need to change our values and we need to make them more reflective of where the organization is there. So the short answer is our value and culture work is never done. It's an ongoing process because it's going to be a part of our DNA.
So once we've launched these values and the values are there, what if there is a value that the company is sticking with that somehow conflicts with my personal values? I don't know if we can come up with an example. Maybe there's something like um, the company insists on efficiency and cutting corners and getting to the result as quickly as possible, and yet my personal value is to do things properly and not cut corners. What do I do as that employee?
It's such a good point. And, we've been talking about organizational values today, but of course, as individuals, we have personal values. We have relationship values. We have values that show up in all different parts of our lives. So conflict between them might actually happen. The first thing that I would say is it a complete misalignment with all of the values or is it one specific value? Because sometimes it's not the entire company, but maybe it's a specific team or a single value that's causing a disconnect there. And is the problem with the values and how they're stated or how they're being lived? Because as we've seen today, it's how they're being lived that makes all of that difference. And then the second question that I'd get you to ask yourself is what's the cost of staying? Because we need
Mm,
to understand that the toll of the misalignment, is it taking a toll on our well-being? And if so, how big is that? Is it causing us to compromise our integrity? Or is it honestly just a source of frustration? Because let's be honest, how often do we get pissed off at our employers? It does happen, right?
yeah.
Um, But if it's really taking us to a point of integrity, then maybe we have to take a serious think about, can we influence change? Now, let's be honest, influencing change in an organization can be really, really hard. But is that an option? Is it we can adjust our place in the company? So maybe we can look at a lateral move to a different team or a different way of working or a different project, but this might just be a short term solution. And this might not be the best answer, but it's the most honest answer that if a company's values are a fundamental mismatch for who you are, the most authentic and courageous thing to do is to find a new company. And I don't think that's a sign of failure, right? It's actually a demonstration of integrity, and it really shows why values are important, because we need to align ourselves with what and how companies are doing and the way that they're doing it.
Yeah. If I believe in luxury and expense and top line products and services, and I'm working at a budget company, there's clearly a misalignment, and you're not going to get the best out of me, are you?
No, and that's the whole point. Like we've talked so much about company culture and values, but at the end of the day, there is so much research out there, and we see the significance that gets put on company culture. People choose culture every day. You know, I shared a stat earlier about being 10% higher than choosing a salary increase. But I know that for myself, if I were to go back in house, I would pick somewhere with a great culture over a significantly high salary.
Yeah. Well, now that we've worked out the values of Build Your Edge, maybe we're your future targets. You never know.
I can't wait.
Now we're at 20,000 employees, I think, over the course of this hour-long conversation. So, Alia, you're leaving behind your values starter kit. And anybody who's watching or listening to this can download it from our website at buildyouredge.org/downloads. And they can start to put it in practice themselves this afternoon. Why not? But also they might want to work with someone like you who can guide them through that process. How should they reach out to you?
So on the values starter kit, and I'd be so excited when people start filling this out because I love values work. But they can click on my logo in the bottom left-hand corner, and that will take you directly to my website. And you can drop me a message on the website. You can also connect on LinkedIn by typing in my full name or my first name, last name at gmail.com. And I am always more than happy to talk to you about values.
Fabulous. And I hope that people do. And what's
So we
one thing that you would like people to remember from this? Yeah, we've covered such a lot of material here today. What's one thing you would like people to take away from today?
make your value actionable.
I like that. Because if we go right back to the beginning, those posters on the fridge that you walk past when you make a cup of coffee, pointless. Don't do that. Paragraphs of text. Yeah, it's always seemed to me that if you need to explain them too hard, you've kind of done it wrong. So I want to thank you, Alia. This has been an amazing, amazing conversation. Um, I've been in places where the values are good and I could understand them and I could remember them. And I remember interviewing people and saying, look, our values are this, 1, 2, 3, 4, and being able to describe them really easily and being able to interview people and dive into them to see whether they match up with those values or not. And the results were incredible. And when the values are properly lived, and I can remember many difficult moments where we couldn't make a decision, or there was some difficult situation that we needed to get through. And what I found was people would say, wait a second, what do our values say? And going back to those values helped us get through those moments, helped us make good decisions, helped keep people together. And the results were just amazing. So thank you. I really like your process. I really hope that people download the values starter kit and start to put them into practice. And I believe almost any person, any company that does that is going to get better results. So thank you so much indeed for your time, not just here recording with us today, but preparing, answering all of my silly questions before we met and getting ready. So thank you so much indeed, Alia.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been so fun chatting with you today, and I do hope that people start to download the kit and identify their values.
Perfect. So please go to buildyouredge.org/downloads and you'll find it there. Thanks for listening. See you next time.